A 4-year-old homeless girl finds two millionaire twins passed out on a country road. But when she goes to help them, someone appears behind her and something happens. Watch until the end. You won't regret it. Comment what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The scorching midday sun beat down mercilessly on the dirt road that cut through the parched fields of rural Georgia. Lily, a girl of just 4 years old, walked barefoot through the hot dust, her small feet already calloused from months of living on the streets of Harmony Creek. Her tattered clothes, a faded pink sundress that had once been much too big and now barely covered her skinny knees, told the story of a childhood stolen by necessity. The girl stopped abruptly when she saw two figures lying on the road ahead. They were two identical men, wearing dark suits completely inappropriate for the sweltering heat of the countryside. Lily approached slowly, her childish curiosity overcoming the fear she had learned to carry with her always. The men were breathing with difficulty, their faces flushed from the sun and dehydration. Mister, you okay?" Lily asked in her small voice, gently touching one of the men's arms. One of the men opened his eyes slowly, his blurred vision struggling to focus on the child's worried face. It was Cash Sullivan, 38, a businessman who, along with his twin brother Dean, owned the largest furniture factory in the area. They had left early for a business meeting in a neighboring town, but their car broke down in the middle of nowhere, and they tried to walk under the relentless sun until their bodies simply gave out. "Water," Cash murmured, his voice hoarse and desperate. Lily looked around, searching for a way to help. She had no water, nothing but her natural kindness and an intelligence that surprised anyone who met her. The girl knew there was a house not too far away, as she had passed it several times in her wanderings around the area. It was then that a woman's voice was heard. Good heavens, what happened here? Miriam Caldwell, a 52-year-old retired nurse, was approaching along the path that led to her simple house. She had gone out to gather some medicinal herbs in her small backyard when she saw the unusual scene on the road. Miriam had lived alone for 5 years since retiring from the regional hospital, preferring the tranquility of the countryside to the hustle and bustle of the city. "They're not feeling well, Ma'am," Lily said, pointing to the two men. "I think it's because of the sun." Miriam knelt beside the brothers, her professional instinct taking over. She quickly checked both of their pulses, rapid but regular. Their faces were sunburned, and it was clear they were suffering from severe dehydration. "We need to get them out of here immediately," Miriam said, more to herself than to Lily. "Girl, do you know these men?" "No, Ma'am." "I found them lying here," Lily replied, her big, worried eyes fixed on the strangers. Dean began to stir, groaning softly. When he opened his eyes and saw Miriam and Lily, his first reaction was confusion. Unlike his brother, Dean had always been more distrustful, more calculating. Even in his weakened state, his mind was already working to understand the situation. Where are we?" Dean asked, trying to sit up. "Easy there, mister. You fainted on the road." "I'm a nurse, and I'm going to take care of you," Miriam said, with the caring authority of someone who had spent decades caring for people. "But first, we need to get out of this sun." With great effort, Miriam managed to help the two men to their feet. Cash leaned heavily on her, while Dean, despite his weakness, tried to maintain some independence. Lily, without being asked, picked up the jackets that had fallen on the ground and followed them towards Miriam's house. The house was small but welcoming, with whitewashed walls and a well-tended garden in front. Miriam settled the brothers in the simple but clean living room, placing cushions so they could lie down on the sofa and an old armchair. Lily stood in the doorway, watching everything with her attentive eyes, as if she were recording every detail in her memory. "I need water. Plenty of electrolyte drink and cold compresses," Miriam murmured, heading towards the kitchen. "Oh, girl, what's your name?" "Lily, ma'am. Lily, can you help me? Do you know where the kitchen is?" The girl nodded and followed Miriam. To the nurse's surprise, Lily not only knew where everything was, but also began to help efficiently, fetching clean towels and even preparing the electrolyte drink with salt and sugar in the exact proportions, as if she had done it many times before. "How do you know how to do this, honey?" Miriam asked, impressed. "I learned by watching Mrs. Gable, who let me sleep on her porch sometimes. She made it when her grandson was sick," Lily replied naturally. Miriam felt a pang in her heart. The girl spoke of sleeping on strangers' porches as if it were the most normal thing in the world. While taking care of the two men, applying cold compresses and making them drink small sips of the electrolyte drink, Miriam couldn't stop observing Lily. The child was not only beautiful, despite the dirt and worn clothes. There was something special about her, a bright intelligence that shone through in every gesture, in every carefully chosen word. Lily helped without being told, anticipated needs, and had a disturbing maturity for someone so young. Cash was the first to recover enough to speak coherently, his eyes, now less glazed, fixed on Lily with genuine curiosity. "Thank you for helping us," he said, his voice still weak. "Do you live around here?" Lily looked at Miriam before answering, a habit she had developed, always checking if it was safe to tell the truth. "No, sir. I live on the streets." The simplicity of the answer hit Cash like a punch to the gut. Such a small child, living on the streets. Dean, who was starting to feel better, also caught the conversation and frowned. "Do your parents know where you are?" Dean asked, his voice carrying a concern he tried to disguise. "I don't have a dad." "And my mum, she left a long time ago," Lily replied, lowering her eyes. Miriam, who was changing Cash's compresses, stopped what she was doing. Something in the way Lily spoke of her mother piqued her professional attention. It wasn't common sadness. There was something more complex, more painful. "Left how, honey?" Miriam asked gently. "She disappeared one night. Some men came to our house, and then she vanished. The lady who took care of me said she wasn't coming back." The silence that followed was heavy. Cash and Dean exchanged glances, both processing the casual tragedy that had just been revealed. Miriam knelt in front of Lily, holding her dirty little hands. "And you've been alone since then?" "Not alone, Mom. There are other kids on the street. We look out for each other." The naturalness with which Lily spoke of such a harsh reality made the hearts of all the adults in the room clench. Cash, who had always been the more emotional of the brothers, felt an immediate connection with that abandoned child. Dean, on the other hand, kept his expression controlled, but his eyes revealed a deep disturbance. "How old are you, Lily?" Cash asked. "4. I'll be 5 when winter comes," she replied, referring to the winter that was still a few months away. Miriam stood up slowly, an idea beginning to form in her mind. There was something in Lily that awakened all her dormant maternal instincts. The nurse had never married, never had children, and had always felt that void as a wound that never completely healed. "Lily, would you like to have dinner here tonight?" Miriam asked. "I can make some mac and cheese." The girl's eyes lit up in a way that broke the hearts of the 3 adults. It was evident that a hot meal was a rare luxury in her life. "Can I really, Mom?" "Of course, honey, and you can take a bath too if you want." Cash watched the interaction with growing emotion. He saw in Lily not only an abandoned child, but an extraordinary person who deserved much more than life had offered her so far. Dean, however, maintained some reservation, his cautious nature making him question the implications of getting involved with that situation. The sun was beginning to set when the brothers finally felt recovered enough to think about leaving. They had managed to contact a mechanic who would come tow them in the morning, so Miriam insisted they spend the night there. "I can't let you go back on the road in this state," she said firmly. "I have 2 small bedrooms. You stay here tonight, and tomorrow you can continue your journey." It was during the simple but lovingly prepared dinner that Cash made a decision that would change all their lives. "Lily," he said, watching how the girl ate politely despite her obvious hunger. "Would you like to live in a real house?" The question caught everyone by surprise. Dean left his fork halfway to his mouth, and Miriam stopped pouring the juice. Lily looked at Cash with her big, bright eyes. "In a house like Mrs. Caldwell's? In an even bigger house, with a room just for you, toys, books?" "Cash," Dean interrupted, his voice laced with warning. But Cash didn't listen to his brother. Something inside him had awakened upon meeting Lily, a purpose he hadn't felt in years. "Would you like that?" he insisted. Lily looked at Miriam, then at Dean, and finally back at Cash. Her answer would be the first step of a journey that would test the limits of love, loyalty, and the redemption of all involved. "I would like that very much, Mr. Cash." And at that moment, as the last ray of sun hid behind the Georgia mountains, none of them could imagine that this seemingly simple decision would trigger a series of events that would reveal buried secrets, test family bonds, and forever change the destiny of a small town in the countryside. The tension at the dinner table was almost palpable. Dean pushed his plate away, his eyes fixed on his brother, with an expression that mixed disbelief and irritation. "Cash, I need to talk to you. Now." His voice was low but filled with urgency. Miriam immediately sensed the discomfort and stood up, reaching out to Lily. "How about you help me wash the dishes, honey? Then we can see if there's a cartoon on TV." Lily nodded, but her intelligent eyes captured the tension between the brothers. She had learned on the streets to read people's expressions, a survival skill she had developed far too early. As she followed Miriam to the kitchen, she kept her ears open to the conversation she knew was coming. "Have you completely lost your mind?" Dean whispered as soon as they were alone in the living room. "We can't just adopt a street child, Cash. Haven't you thought about the implications of this?" Cash leaned forward, his hands clasped over the table. "What implications? A child is living on the streets, Dean. On the streets, at 4 years old. And it's a tragedy, I agree. But there are institutions for that, specialized organizations. We are not prepared to take care of a child, especially one who clearly has trauma. Look at her, Dean." Cash gestured towards the kitchen, where they could hear Lily's soft voice talking to Miriam. "She is special. Did you see how she helped take care of us? How she talks, how she thinks. This girl has incredible potential." Dean ran his hands through his hair, a gesture he made when he was stressed. "And you think that justifies us making such an impulsive decision?" "Cash, our company is going through difficult times. Suppliers are delaying deliveries, we have cash flow problems, and you want to add the responsibility of raising a child?" In the kitchen, Lily stopped drying the dishes. The words "company" and "difficulties" awakened something in her memory. Fragments of conversations she had heard, faces she vaguely recognized. Miriam noticed the change in the girl's expression. "Are you okay, Lily?" "Mrs. Caldwell, do those men work in a factory?" Miriam frowned. "Why do you ask, honey?" "It's just, I think I've seen them before, or people who look like them." Before Miriam could answer, Cash's raised voice came from the living room. "The company can wait, Dean. This girl can't." "The company can't wait," Dean retorted, forgetting to keep his voice down. "We have 150 employees depending on us, entire families who live off the jobs we provide. And you want to risk everything for an emotional impulse?" Cash stood up abruptly, causing the chair to scrape against the wooden floor. "Emotional impulse. Is that how you see compassion, Dean? As weakness?" "I see it as irresponsibility. And you know very well that we don't have the financial structure to bear the costs of raising a child right now." Miriam appeared in the doorway of the living room, with Lily hiding behind her legs. The nurse had heard enough to understand that the brothers were in deep disagreement. "Gentlemen, please, the girl is listening." Both brothers turned, seeing Lily peeking out from behind Miriam with her big, frightened eyes. Cash felt a pang of guilt in his chest. "Sorry, Lily, we didn't mean to scare you." "Are you fighting because of me?" she asked in her small voice. Dean knelt in front of her, his expression softening slightly. "We're not fighting, little one. We're just talking about grown-up things." "Is it because of the money?" Lily's direct question surprised everyone. "I heard you talking about the factory. My mom worked in a factory before she left." The silence that followed was charged with tension. Miriam felt a chill run down her spine. "What factory, honey?" she asked gently. "One that made tables and chairs. She would leave early in the morning and come back late. She always had some papers in her bag, writing things." Cash and Dean exchanged glances, a mutual and disturbing understanding passing between them. There was only one furniture factory in the area, large enough to have secretaries who took work home. "Lily," Cash said carefully, "what was your mother's name?" "Lucy. Lucy Miller." Dean felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath his feet. Lucy Miller had worked at their factory 5 years ago as a secretary in the administrative department. A competent, discreet woman who had abruptly resigned and disappeared without adequate explanation. "My God," Cash murmured, the realization hitting him like a wave. "Lucy, you're the daughter of the Lucy who used to work for us." Lily nodded, not fully understanding the impact of her revelation. She always talked about the twin bosses. She said they looked exactly alike. Miriam watched the scene with growing concern. There was something in the brothers' reaction that suggested the connection with Lucy was more complicated than a simple employer-employee relationship. "What happened to her?" Dean asked, his voice low and controlled. "She disappeared one night. Some men came to our house, said some things I didn't understand, and then she got very scared. The next day, Mrs. Davis, who took care of me when Mommy worked, said she had left and wasn't coming back." "What men were these?" Cash insisted. Lily shook her head. "I don't know. They were men in suits like you, but they were mean. They spoke loudly. Mommy was crying after they left." Dean stood up slowly, his mind quickly processing the implications. If Lucy had disappeared suspiciously soon after leaving the company, it could mean that she had gotten involved in something dangerous, or that she had discovered something she shouldn't have. "Cash, we need to talk, in private." His voice carried an urgency that hadn't been there before. Miriam, realizing the gravity of the situation, took Lily by the hand. "How about you take that bath now, honey? I'll find a clean nightgown for you to sleep in." As Miriam led Lily to the bathroom, the brothers went out to the porch of the house. The night was cool, and the sound of crickets created a strange contrast with the tension that hung between them. "Do you remember why Lucy left the company?" Dean asked. Cash frowned, forcing his memory. "She said something about personal problems. Dad thought it was strange, because she was one of the best employees, but he didn't insist. And don't you think it's suspicious that she disappeared soon after, leaving her daughter behind?" "What are you implying?" Dean walked to the porch railing, looking at the darkness of the surrounding fields. "I'm implying that maybe Lucy discovered something in the company that she shouldn't have, something that forced dangerous people to persuade her to keep silent. That's absurd, Dean. Our company is clean, it always has been. Our company, yes. But what about before we took over? Do you blindly trust everything Dad did?" The question hit Cash like a slap. George Sullivan had been a respected man in the community, but he was also known for his reserved nature and sometimes questionable business methods. "You think Dad was involved in something illegal?" "I don't know. But if Lucy discovered something and was threatened for it, then Lily may be in danger too." Inside the house, Lily was in the bathtub, playing with some rubber toys that Miriam had found in a closet. The nurse watched the girl with growing affection, but also with concern. "Lily, do you remember anything else about the night your mother disappeared?" The girl stopped playing, her eyes becoming distant. "I remember she hid some things under the bed before the men came. Papers and a brown envelope." "What kind of papers?" "I can't read yet, but there were numbers, lots of numbers, and people's names." Miriam felt a chill. Documents with numbers and names could be evidence of financial irregularities. exactly the kind of thing that could put someone in danger. On the porch, Cash and Dean continued their discussion in low tones. "Even if you're right," Cash said, "we can't just abandon Lily. If she really is in danger, it's our responsibility to protect her." "Our responsibility." "Cash, we don't even know if these theories make sense. And even if they do, bringing her to our house could put her in even more danger." "Then what's your suggestion? To let her go back to the streets?" Dean didn't answer immediately. Part of him agreed with his brother. Abandoning a defenseless child was unthinkable. But his pragmatic nature warned him of the risks of getting involved in a situation that was clearly more complex than it seemed. "We can leave her with Miriam temporarily," he suggested finally, "until we find out more about what really happened to Lucy." "And what if Miriam doesn't want to? She's a retired lady, Dean. We can't just dump that responsibility on her." At that moment, Miriam appeared in the doorway of the porch, as if she had heard her name being mentioned. "Lily is sleeping," she said softly. "I found an old nightgown that fits her." "Miriam," Cash began hesitantly, "we need to talk to you about something important." The nurse joined them on the porch, immediately noticing the seriousness on their faces. "It has to do with Lily's mother, doesn't it?" "How do you know?" Dean asked. "Because when you found out who she was, your expressions changed completely. And because Lily told me some things during the bath that worried me." Cash took a deep breath. "Lucy used to work for us, and we suspect that she may have gotten involved in something dangerous before she disappeared." Miriam nodded slowly. Her nurse's intuition had picked up that there was more to the story than met the eye. "And you think Lily may be in danger too?" "It's possible," Dean admitted. "That's why we need to be very careful about how we proceed." "Then she stays here," Miriam said without hesitation. "Miriam, you don't understand," Cash protested. "It could be dangerous." "I understand perfectly. A 4-year-old child lost her mother, lived on the streets, and now we find out that she may be in danger. Where else should she stay but with people who care about her?" The determination in Miriam's voice surprised the two brothers. There was a maternal force awakening in her that none of them had anticipated. "But we'll help with everything," Cash insisted, "financially, emotionally, with whatever is needed. And we'll investigate what happened to Lucy," Dean added. "Discreetly, but we'll find out the truth." As the three adults made their plans on the porch, none of them noticed the small figure in the bedroom window, watching them through the curtain. Lily hadn't fallen asleep as they thought. Her experiences on the streets had taught her to pretend to sleep when adults talked about important things. She had heard enough to understand that her mother hadn't simply disappeared. She had been forced to leave. And now, these kind people who had taken her in were willing to help her discover the truth. For the first time in months, Lily felt something she had almost forgotten what it was like. Hope. 3 days had passed since Lily arrived at Miriam's house, and the routine that was established surprised everyone with its naturalness. The girl woke up early, even before sunrise, a habit developed on the streets where safety depended on always being alert. Miriam found her every morning sitting in the kitchen, watching through the window, the first rays of light cut through the mist that covered the fields. "Good morning, sweetie," Miriam would say, and the shy smile she received in response warmed her heart in a way she hadn't experienced in a long time. Cash had returned to town to take care of business, but made a point of visiting daily. Dean, on the other hand, kept some distance, although Miriam noticed that he watched Lily with a curiosity that he tried to disguise. The girl, with her sharp intelligence, had noticed the difference between the brothers and behaved differently with each one. With Cash, she was more open, asked questions, told stories of her days on the streets with a naturalness that broke the heart. With Dean, she was more cautious, respectful, as if she knew instinctively that she needed to earn his trust gradually. On the morning of the 4th day, Cash arrived earlier than usual, bringing with him a worried expression that did not go unnoticed by Miriam. "Did something happen?" she asked, serving coffee while Lily played in the yard with a rag doll that the nurse had found in her storage. "Problems at the factory," Cash sighed, sitting heavily at the table. "Our main lumber supplier cancelled the contract. Claims internal problems, but I suspect he received a better offer from a competitor. And that's serious. Very. Without raw materials, we can't honor the orders we already have. And if we don't deliver on time—" He didn't need to finish the sentence. Miriam watched Lily through the window. The girl had stopped playing and was staring fixedly at something on the horizon. "Lily seems restless today," she commented. "She asked several times if you were coming. She asked for me. She asked for both of you, for you and Dean. She said she had a strange dream." Cash got up, worried. "What kind of dream?" "Better she tell you herself." They went out to the yard, where Lily continued standing, looking at the dirt road. When she saw Cash, she ran to him, hugging his legs with unusual force. "Uncle Cash, you're not leaving too, are you?" The use of the term uncle took Cash by surprise, but it was the anguish in the girl's voice that alarmed him. "Why would I leave, sweetie?" "Because in my dream, some men came to get you and Uncle Dean. They were the same men who made my mom leave." Miriam and Cash exchanged worried glances. Lily's nightmares had begun on the second night, always involving shadowy figures who took important people away from her. "Lily, can you remember what those men were like? The real ones who went to your house?" The girl closed her eyes, concentrating. One was fat, with a mustache. The other was thinner. He wore sunglasses even though it was night. They talked to Mommy about some papers, said she had to return something. "What thing?" "I don't know, but Mommy cried and said she didn't know anything. Then they left, but the next day she packed her bags and left me with Mrs. Davis." Cash knelt in front of Lily, holding her little hands. "Sweetie, do you remember where your mother kept those papers the men wanted? She hid them under the bed, inside a shoebox. But when Mrs. Davis picked me up to take me to her house, the papers weren't there anymore." At that moment, the sound of a car approaching made everyone look at the road. It was Dean, arriving earlier than usual, and his expression was even darker than his brother's. "We need to talk," he said as soon as he got out of the car, barely greeting Miriam and Lily. "Not now, Dean. Lily was telling us about—" "That's exactly what I need to talk about." Dean looked at the girl, then at Miriam. "Someone was at the factory last night." The silence that followed was tense. Lily, realizing the gravity of the conversation, approached Miriam, who instinctively placed a protective hand on the child's shoulder. "What do you mean, was?" Cash asked. "They broke into the main office. They messed with the files, but apparently didn't take anything of value. Computers, money from the safe, all untouched. So what did they want? Information, old documents." Dean looked significantly at Lily. "Mainly from the administrative department from 5 years ago." Miriam felt a shiver run down her spine. "You think it has to do with Lucy?" "I don't think. I'm sure." Dean approached Cash, lowering his voice. "I found a specific drawer rummaged through. The drawer where we kept the files of the fired employees. Was Lucy's file there?" "It wasn't anymore." Lily, who had been quiet until then, tugged at Miriam's shirt. "Aunt Miriam, can I say something?" "Of course, honey. I know where my mom hid the papers for real." The 3 adults stopped everything they were doing, staring at the 4-year-old girl who watched them with her big, serious eyes. "What do you mean, Lily?" Cash asked gently. "The box under the bed was just to mislead. My mum was very smart. She hid the important papers in a place where no one would look." Dean knelt next to Cash. "Where, sweetie?" "In my doll. The big doll she sewed for me. She opened the doll's belly and put the papers in there, then sewed it up again." "And where is that doll now?" Miriam asked, although she already suspected the answer. "At Mrs. Davis's house. I had to leave it there when she didn't want to take care of me anymore." Cash and Dean exchanged glances. If Lily was right, the documents that someone was desperately looking for still existed, hidden in a child's toy. "Lily, do you remember where Mrs. Davis's house is?" Dean asked. I remember. It's on Church Street, the blue house with the green gate. We need to go there, Cash said, getting up. No, Miriam's voice was firm. We're not going anywhere with this girl until we know exactly what we're dealing with. Miriam, you don't understand. If these documents prove some irregularity, I understand perfectly. And I also understand that you're talking about putting a 4-year-old child in danger because of papers we don't even know what they say. Dean, surprisingly, agreed with Miriam. She's right, Cash. If we go there and they find out that we know about the documents, we'll put everyone at risk. So what do you suggest? That we stay here waiting while someone may be destroying evidence? We suggest, said a new voice behind them, that you be more careful with your conversations. Everyone turned to see a woman at the entrance to the yard. It was Sarah Davis, about 60 years old, with grey hair tied in a bun and a worried expression on her wrinkled face. Mrs. Davis, Lily exclaimed, running to hug the woman who had taken care of her briefly. Hi, sweetie, I missed you. Sarah hugged Lily, but her eyes were fixed on the adults. Can I talk to you? In private? Miriam took Lily inside the house with the promise of preparing a special snack, while Sarah joined the brothers in the yard. Last night, 2 men showed up at my house, she said bluntly. They asked about Lily, about where she was. They wanted to know if she had left anything behind when she left. What did you say? Dean asked. I said I didn't know anything, but they didn't believe me. They searched my whole house looking for a doll. Cash clenched his fists. Did they hurt you? No, but they made it clear that I should forget this conversation, and that if I knew anything about documents or papers, it would be better to hand them over. Is the doll still there? Dean asked. Sarah shook her head. I took it to a safe place as soon as they left. I had a feeling they would be back. Where? With my brother in Charleston. But before you do anything, you need to know that these men aren't playing around. One of them mentioned that accidents happen to curious people. The weight of the threat fell on everyone like a stone. It was no longer just about mysterious documents or financial irregularities. There were dangerous people willing to use violence to get what they wanted. Sarah, Cash said carefully, do you know what really happened to Lucy? The older woman looked at the house, making sure Lily couldn't hear them. Lucy discovered something in your factory. Something that involved dirty money. She came to me the night before she disappeared. She was desperate, said she had proof that someone was using the company to launder money. Who? Dean asked, although he already suspected the answer. She didn't say names, but she mentioned that they were important people in town, people with the power to destroy anyone who got in their way. And why didn't she go to the police? Sarah laughed bitterly. Because one of the men who threatened her was a cop. The revelation hit the brothers like lightning. It wasn't just about corporate corruption, but about a scheme involving local authorities. That's why she had to disappear, Sarah continued, to protect Lily. But now that the girl is here with you, they know she may have access to the documents. What do you think we should do? Cash asked. You should get out of town. All of you, take Lily and disappear until this blows over. We can't, Dean protested. We have a company, employees depending on us. And what good will all that do you if you're in jail or worse? At that moment, Lily appeared in the doorway of the house, holding a glass of juice and watching the adults with an expression too serious for a 4-year-old. Aunt Miriam said you're talking about important things, she said. Is it about my mom? Sarah knelt in front of the girl. It is, sweetie. And you need to be very brave, because we may have to take a trip. A trip where? To a place where you'll be safe while the adults sort some things out. Lily looked at Cash, then at Dean, and finally at Sarah. Her next question made everyone's heart clench. Are you going to abandon me too? Lily's question echoed in the yard like a gunshot, leaving all the adults speechless. The raw vulnerability in the 4-year-old girl's voice exposed a wound that still bled, the fear of abandonment that had haunted her since her mother's disappearance. Cash was the first to react, kneeling next to Sarah and taking Lily's small hands. Never, sweetie. We're never going to abandon you. If we have to leave, we'll all go together. Promise? Lily's eyes filled with tears that she struggled to contain. I promise. Dean watched the scene with a complex expression. His brother's determination to protect Lily touched something deep inside him, but his practical nature warned him of the growing risks they faced. Cash, he said carefully. We need to think with a cool head. If there really are dangerous people after these documents, taking Lily with us could put her in even more danger. And leaving her here alone will keep her safe, Cash retorted, standing up. Dean, they've already searched Sarah. How long until they find out that Lily is with Miriam? Sarah shook her head. You don't understand. These people have contacts throughout the region. Running away may be useless if they really want to find you. So what do you suggest? Asked Miriam, who had come out of the house and overheard part of the conversation. That we recover the documents before they find out where they are. If we get the proof of what Lucy found, maybe we can use that to protect ourselves. Dean frowned. Or we can end up dead for knowing too much. We already know too much, Sarah said pragmatically. The question now is whether we're going to use that knowledge to our advantage or if we're going to keep running forever. At that moment, the sound of an engine approaching made everyone alert. A black car was coming up the dirt road, raising a cloud of dust behind it. Sarah paled. It's one of the cars that was at my house yesterday, she whispered. Get Lily inside, Dean ordered, his voice suddenly authoritative. Now. Miriam picked up Lily and ran into the house, while Sarah hid behind a tree in the yard. The brothers stood in front of the house, trying to look casual as the car approached. The vehicle stopped in front of the gate, and two men got out. One was indeed fat, with a thick mustache, exactly as Lily had described. The other was thin, wearing sunglasses despite the sun already setting. "Good afternoon," said the fat man, his voice dripping with false cordiality. "We're private investigators. We're looking for a missing child, a girl of about 4 years old." "We haven't seen any children around here," Cash replied, trying to keep his voice steady. The thin man approached closer, taking off his sunglasses and revealing cold, calculating eyes. "You're the owners of Sullivan Furniture, aren't you?" Dean stepped forward. "We are." "And you are?" "As I said, private investigators. The child we're looking for may have important information about a case we're working on." "What kind of information could a 4-year-old child have?" Cash asked, genuinely curious about how they would respond. Children see things, they hear things, sometimes they even pick up things they shouldn't. The fat man smiled, but there was no warmth in his expression. "Toys, for example. Old dolls that may contain memories." The message was clear. They knew about the documents in the doll. "Well, as we said, we haven't seen any children," Dean repeated. "If we see one, we'll let you know." The thin man walked to the gate, placing his hand on the lock as if he were testing its strength. "It would be interesting if we could take a look at the property, just to be sure." "Not without a warrant," Cash said firmly. "A warrant?" The fat man laughed. "Mr. Sullivan, I don't think you understand our position. We don't need warrants." Dean felt the blood run cold in his veins. The implicit threat was clear. "What exactly do you want?" he asked. "We want the child, and we want anything she may have brought from the old house where she lived. Toys, clothes, anything. And what if we don't know where she is?" The thin man put his sunglasses back on. "Then that would be a shame. Accidents happen frequently in the countryside. Cars that break down on deserted roads, fires in old houses." He looked significantly at Miriam's house. "Sometimes people simply disappear." Cash clenched his fists, but Dean put a hand on his arm, warning him not to react impulsively. "We're going to take a look around and ask the neighbors," Dean said diplomatically. "If we find out anything, we'll get in touch." "Excellent." The fat man handed over a card. "My number is there, and gentlemen," he paused dramatically, "don't take too long. Our patience has limits. The two men returned to the car and left, leaving a cloud of dust and tension in the air. As soon as they disappeared around the bend in the road, Sarah came out from behind the tree, visibly shaken. "They're not bluffing," she said. "I've seen what these men are capable of." Inside the house, Miriam had hidden Lily in the closet of the bedroom, instructing her to remain absolutely silent. The girl obeyed, but her big eyes showed the terror she felt. When the men finally left, she came out of hiding, trembling. "It was them, Aunt Miriam, the men from my dream, the ones who took my mom away." Miriam hugged Lily tightly, feeling her heart break as she realized how much suffering such a small child had already gone through. "They're gone, sweetie, you're safe. But they'll be back, won't they?" Miriam couldn't lie. "Maybe." The brothers and Sarah entered the house, their grim expressions confirming Miriam's worst fears. "We need to get out of here," Dean said bluntly. "Today. Now." "Where to?" asked Miriam, still holding Lily. "Charleston," Sarah replied, "to get the doll and then decide what to do with what we find inside." "And what if it's a trap?" Cash questioned. "If they're waiting for us to do exactly that?" "Then we're screwed anyway," Sarah said pragmatically. "At least, this way we have a chance to find out the truth." As the adults discussed their next steps, Lily broke free from Miriam's embrace and walked to the window, watching the road where the men had disappeared. "Aunt Miriam," she said softly, "I remembered something." Everyone stopped talking and turned to her. "What thing, honey?" "On the night my mom left, before the men came, she told me something. She said that if anyone ever asked about the papers, I had to say that she took everything with her." "But you said she hid them in the doll," Cash reminded her. "She hid some papers in the doll. But the most important ones—" Lily hesitated, as if she were trying to remember something complex. "She said she put them in a place that only she and I knew." Dean knelt in front of her. "Where, Lily?" "At the church. There's a statue of the Virgin Mary that stands alone in a small chapel. My mom always lit candles for her when I got sick. She put an envelope behind the statue." The silence that followed was charged with hope and terror in equal parts. If Lily was right, there were two sets of documents, those in the doll in Charleston and the most important ones hidden at the local church. "The church is in the center of town," Sarah said. "It's going to be full of people now, at the afternoon mass. Then we'll have to wait until nightfall," Dean decided. "And what if they come back before then?" asked Miriam. "Then we'll have to defend ourselves," Cash said, a new determination in his voice. As the group made desperate plans in the living room, none of them noticed the black car parked behind a clump of trees about 500 yards from the house. Inside it, the thin man spoke on the phone in a low voice. "Confirmed. The child is there, and apparently they know about the documents." "Yes, sir." "We'll wait for nightfall and settle this once and for all." He hung up the phone and turned to his partner. "We received orders not to leave any witnesses." The fat man smiled coldly. "It's about time. I was getting tired of playing nice." Meanwhile, in Miriam's house, Lily approached Cash and tugged on his shirt. "Uncle Cash, can I tell you something just for you?" He knelt down to her level. "Of course, sweetie," Lily whispered in his ear. "I lied about the papers at the church." Cash frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" "My mom didn't hide anything there. But the bad men were listening to our conversation outside. I saw them through the window." The revelation hit Cash like lightning. Lily, at 4 years old, had concocted a sophisticated lie to deceive the kidnappers. The girl's intelligence was even more impressive than he had imagined. "So where are the really important documents?" he whispered back. "With me," she replied, touching the small crucifix she wore around her neck. "My mum sewed some very small papers inside the crucifix before giving it to me. She said that if I was ever in danger, it was those papers that were going to save me." Cash looked at the simple crucifix that he had assumed was just a sentimental gift. In fact, it was carrying the evidence that could destroy or save them all. "Lily, you are a very smart girl," he whispered. But now we are in real danger. These men will come back and are watching us." "I know. That's why I only told you, because you promise you won't abandon me." At that moment, Cash understood that it was no longer just about protecting a child. Lily had become a player in the dangerous game that unfolded, and its early intelligence could be both his salvation and his condemnation. Cash remained kneeling beside Lily for a few seconds, processing the magnitude of what he had just discovered. The 4-year-old girl was not only a victim of circumstances, she was a strategic survivor who had guarded the most dangerous secret without anyone suspecting. "Lily," he whispered, "you can't tell anyone else about the crucifix, not even Aunt Miriam or Uncle Dean. For now, it's our secret." She nodded gravely, a dauntingly adult maturity shining in his infantile eyes. "Because if they know, the bad men will hurt everyone to get to." "Exactly." Cash stood up, his mind working quickly. They needed to get out of there. But now he was sure that the men would not let them leave easily. And with Lily literally carrying the evidence they were looking for, any false movement could be fatal. "Change of plans," he announced to the group. "We're not going to wait for nightfall. We're leaving now, while there's still movement in town." Dean frowned. "Why?" "It would be safer to go to church when it's dark, because they're watching us. I saw reflections of glasses in the woods back there." Cash lied partially. He had seen the reflections, but his real urgency came from the discovery about the crucifix. Sarah approached the window, peeking discreetly through the curtain. "He's right. There's a car parked far away among the trees." "So how are we going to get out without them following us?" asked Miriam, automatically pulling Lily closer. "I know a trail in the back of the property," Sarah said. "It leads to the old road that skirts the town. We can reach the church from behind without passing through the main street. And then we improvise." In the next 20 minutes, they prepared for the most important escape of their lives. Miriam packed a small backpack with water and crackers, while Mrs. Davis sketched a quick map of the trail they should follow. Dean checked if they had enough cash for emergencies, and Cash kept Lily close, protecting the secret she carried. "Lily, can you walk far?" Miriam asked, worried about the little girl's small legs. "Yes, Ma'am. On the streets I walked all day." The simple answer reminded everyone that despite her young age, Lily had a physical endurance developed by the necessities of street life. When they left through the back of the house, the sun was already low on the horizon, creating long shadows among the trees. Mrs. Davis led the group, followed by Miriam and Lily, with the brothers bringing up the rear. The trail was narrow and uneven, forcing them to walk single file. For the first 15 minutes, only the sound of their footsteps and heavy breathing broke the silence. Lily, surprisingly, kept pace without complaining, just holding Miriam's hand tightly. It was Dean who first heard the sounds of pursuit. "Stop," he whispered. "Someone's behind us." They hid behind a group of large trees, controlling their breathing as they heard male voices approaching on the trail. "They went this way, I'm sure," said a voice they recognized as the fat man's. "The footprints in the mud are recent." "How many are there?" asked the skinny man's voice. "5, including the kid." "The boss said not to leave any witnesses." "None." Miriam covered her mouth with her hand to stifle a gasp of horror. Lily, sensing the adult's fear, squeezed the cross against her chest even tighter. "Stay on the trail," Mrs. Davis whispered. "I'll slow them down." "No way," Cash protested. "We're not leaving you behind." "It's not leaving me behind. It's giving you a chance to get to town with the girl." Mrs. Davis pulled a small pocket knife from her pocket. "I've survived 60 years in this world. I know how to defend myself." Before anyone could protest, she disappeared into the bushes, moving with surprising agility for her age. The remaining 4 continued along the trail, now at a faster pace. Behind them, they heard shouts and the sound of branches breaking, indicating that Mrs. Davis had encountered her pursuers. "Is Grandma Davis going to be okay?" Lily asked, tears starting to run down her face. "She's smarter than they are," Miriam replied, though her own voice trembled with worry. 20 minutes later, they reached the old road that Mrs. Davis had mentioned. It was a cobblestone street dating back to colonial times, now little used due to the construction of the main highway. From there, they could see the lights of Harmony Creek beginning to light up in the twilight. "The church is 3 blocks from here," Dean said, consulting the map that Mrs. Davis had drawn. They walked along the side streets, avoiding the downtown area where they might be recognized. Lily had stopped crying, but walked in silence, clearly physically and emotionally exhausted. The Harmony Creek Church was a simple but imposing colonial building with 2 bell towers and a large yard in front. At this hour, it was practically empty, with only a few candles lit on the main altar. "Where's the Lady Chapel you mentioned?" Cash asked Lily, keeping up appearances in case anyone was watching them. Lily pointed to a small side chapel where an image of Our Lady of Sorrows stood in a niche decorated with withered flowers. They approached slowly, Miriam lighting a candle as if they were only there to pray. Dean stood guard at the entrance to the church, while Cash helped Lily check behind the image. "There's nothing here," she said aloud to maintain the charade. Then she whispered to Cash, "Like I said, my mom never hid anything here." "Great," he whispered back. "Now we need to get out of here and find out what's really in your cross." At that moment, Dean made an urgent signal from the entrance. 2 men were approaching the church, not the same ones who had threatened them, but clearly working for the same people. "Back exit," Miriam whispered, picking Lily up. They left through the sacristy, which led to a small courtyard behind the church. From there, they could hear the men entering the church and talking to the priest about recent visitors. "We need a safe place to examine the documents," Cash said when they were back on the dark streets. "I know a place," Miriam said. "My sister has a summer house in the mountains, about an hour from here. It's empty this time of year. How do we get there? Walking would be impossible with Lily." "We need a car," Dean thought quickly. "Father Anthony, he's known me since I was a kid. He might lend us the parish car." They cautiously returned to the church, now empty of the men who were looking for them. Father Anthony, an elderly man with white hair, greeted them with evident concern. "Dean, my son, what happened? 2 men were here asking about you. They said they were police, but they didn't show any ID. Father, we're in danger. I need to ask a big favor." 15 minutes later, they were driving along the mountain roads towards the summer house, using the parish's old Fiat. Lily slept in Miriam's lap, exhausted by the day's events. The house was in a small clearing surrounded by pine trees. It was simple but comfortable, with 2 bedrooms and a fireplace in the main room. Miriam lit some candles, creating a welcoming atmosphere despite the tense circumstances. "Now," Cash said gently, waking Lily, "can you show us what your mother really hid?" Lily nodded, taking the cross from her neck with small but determined fingers. "She said that when I grew up, I would understand why this was so important." Carefully, she showed a small, almost invisible seam on the back of the cross. Cash used a small pocket knife to open it delicately, revealing 2 pieces of paper folded into tiny squares. When they unfolded the papers, they discovered that they were not complex documents, but 2 simple lists handwritten by Lucy. One list contained names, local politicians, businessmen, even a judge. The second list showed dates and amounts, money transfers that clearly did not correspond to the factory's legitimate business. "My God," Dean murmured, recognizing several names on the list. Dad was laundering money for half the powerful people in the region, and the other half probably knew and benefited from it, Cash added, feeling sick. Miriam, who had put Lily to sleep on the couch, joined them at the table. "What are you going to do with this?" "I don't know," Dean admitted. "If we hand it over to the authorities, we'll destroy our family and our company. But if we don't do anything, you'll spend the rest of your lives running," Miriam finished. It was then that they heard the sound of cars approaching on the mountain road, multiple vehicles moving quickly in the direction of the house. "How did they find us?" Cash asked, desperate. Dean looked at the approaching lights, then at the documents on the table, and finally at Lily sleeping innocently on the couch. "Someone betrayed us," he said simply, "and now we have no more options." The car lights illuminated the windows of the house, and hostile voices echoed from outside. They were surrounded, with incriminating evidence in their hands and a 4-year-old child to protect. And for the first time since it all began, Cash wondered if his promise to never abandon Lily would be impossible to keep. The cars stopped in a semicircle around the house, their headlights creating a stage of white light that transformed the peaceful mountain night into something menacing. Cash quickly folded the documents and handed them to Miriam. "Hide this," he whispered. "Anywhere." Miriam took the papers and stuffed them inside the pillowcase where Lily slept, just before the front door was kicked in violently. 3 men entered, led by the fat, mustached man they already knew. Behind him came 2 others they hadn't seen before, a nervous-looking young man and an older man, clearly the boss of the group. "What a touching family reunion," the older man said, his voice laced with sarcasm. "Sorry to interrupt, but you have something that belongs to us." Lily woke up with the noise, but Miriam quickly pulled her behind her, protecting her with her own body. "We don't know what you're talking about," Dean said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Sure you do." The boss approached the table where the documents had been moments before. "The girl brought some gifts from her mother. We want them back." "What gifts?" Cash asked. The fat man laughed. "Stop playing dumb. We know Lucy hid documents. We know the kid knows where they are. And we know you've already found them." "How do you know?" The question escaped Dean's lips before he could stop himself. "Because someone told us," the boss replied, smiling coldly. "Someone very close to you." At that moment, a familiar figure appeared in the doorway, Mrs. Davis, but now with a completely different expression. There was no longer the maternal affection she had shown for Lily, only calculated coldness. "Mrs. Davis?" Miriam barely managed to pronounce the name, the shock evident in her voice. "I'm sorry," Mrs. Davis said, avoiding looking directly at Lily. "But I have my own family to protect. They made an offer I couldn't refuse." "You betrayed us," Cash said, anger rising in his voice. "After everything Lily has been through, you betrayed her." "The girl will be fine," Mrs. Davis replied defensively. "They just want the documents." The boss laughed. "Mrs. Davis is a smart woman. She knows when it's time to choose the winning side." Lily, who had been quiet behind Miriam, took a step forward. Her small eyes were fixed on Mrs. Davis, and there was a deep sadness in them that broke the hearts of everyone present. "Why, Grandma Davis?" she asked in her small voice. "I liked you." Mrs. Davis looked away, clearly uncomfortable with the innocent question. "Enough with the drama," the boss interrupted. "Where are the documents?" "We don't have any documents," Dean insisted. The fat man approached Lily, causing Miriam to instinctively step further in front of the girl. "The child will tell us where they are. Children always tell the truth when they're scared." "Leave her alone," Cash said, taking a threatening step towards the man. The nervous young man immediately pulled out a gun, pointing it at Cash. "Quiet, hero!" The sight of the gun made Lily start to cry silently, tears running down her face as she clung to Miriam's skirt. "Look at that," the boss said, watching the girl's reaction. "She knows exactly what we're talking about." He knelt in front of Lily, assuming an expression that tried to be gentle, but came across as deeply threatening. "Hi, little one. Do you remember me? I knew your mum." Lily nodded shyly. "Your mum took some papers that weren't hers. Do you know where she put those papers?" "She's gone," Lily whispered. "She took everything with her." "No, little one. She left the papers with you, maybe in a special toy, a doll, or maybe," his eyes fixed on the cross that Lily wore around her neck, "in a piece of jewelry." Cash's heart stopped. They knew about the cross. "It's just a present from my mom," Lily said, instinctively covering the cross with her hands. "I'm sure it is." The man held out his hand. "Can I see?" "No!" The firmness in the voice of a 4-year-old surprised everyone. Even terrified, Lily was not willing to give up her mother's last gift. "Lily," Mrs. Davis said, trying to use a maternal tone, "be a good girl and give it to the man." "You're not my grandma anymore," Lily replied, turning her back on Mrs. Davis. The boss lost his patience. "Enough of this charade." He signaled to the fat man, who approached Lily with clear intentions. It was then that Dean made a desperate decision. "Stop! I know where the real documents are." Everyone turned to him. "Where?" the boss asked. "At the factory. In the safe in my father's office. Lucy made copies, but the originals are still there." It was a lie, but Dean hoped it would buy them enough time to think of a plan. "Interesting," the boss said. "Then let's all take a little trip to the factory." "You don't need to take the girl," Miriam protested. "We do. She's our guarantee that you won't try anything stupid." In the following minutes, they were forced out of the house and into the cars. Miriam held Lily in her lap throughout the journey, whispering words of comfort in the terrified girl's ear. The Sullivan factory was on the outskirts of Harmony Creek, a complex of warehouses and offices that was bustling with activity during the day, but now was dark and silent. The cars stopped in the main yard, and the group was led to the administrative building. Dean opened the office with trembling hands, turning on the lights and revealing a large room dominated by a large desk and an old safe in the corner. "Open it," the boss ordered. Dean spun the combination, praying silently that there would be something in the safe that could convince the kidnappers that there were important documents there. The safe opened, revealing only some company papers, emergency cash, and some jewelry that had belonged to the twins' mother. "Where are the documents?" the fat man asked, impatient. "They should be here," Dean said, pretending to search through the papers. The boss quickly realized he was being deceived. "Do you think we're idiots?" He signaled to the nervous young man, who pointed the gun directly at Lily. "Last chance. Where are the documents?" It was then that Lily, seeing the gun pointed at her and realizing that she had reached the end of the line, made a decision that surprised everyone. "Okay," she said, her voice small but firm. "I'll give you the cross. But first, you have to promise one thing." "What thing?" the boss asked, intrigued. "That you won't hurt Uncle Cash, Uncle Dean, and Aunt Miriam." The silence that followed was charged with emotion. A 4-year-old child was trying to negotiate her own safety for the lives of the people she loved. "Lily." "No," Cash whispered. "It's okay, sweetie," the boss said, his voice softening slightly. "I promise." Lily took the cross from her neck with trembling fingers and handed it over. But what the boss found inside would change everything once again. The boss carefully opened Lily's cross, his thick fingers working at the small seam that Lucy had made years ago. When he finally managed to extract the tiny papers, his expression of expectation turned to confusion, then to anger. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, unfolding the pieces of paper. Instead of the lists of names and amounts he expected to find, there were only childish drawings, small, colorful birds made with crayons, and a message written in Lucy's careful handwriting, "For my little Lily, who will one day fly free like the little birds. Mommy loves you forever." The silence in the office was broken only by the sound of the boss's heavy breathing. Cash, Dean, and Miriam watched the scene with a mixture of relief and terror, realizing that Lily had outsmarted them again. "Where are the real documents?" the boss asked, his voice low and dangerous. Lily, still in Miriam's lap, looked at him with her big, innocent eyes. "What documents? My mom only gave me drawings." "Don't make me look like an idiot," the boss exploded, throwing the papers on the floor. "Lucy stole important documents. They have to be somewhere." It was then that Dean realized something crucial. Throughout this ordeal, they had assumed that Lucy had actually stolen compromising documents. But what if the truth was different? Wait, he said carefully. How do you know that Lucy actually took anything? Who said that? The fat man exchanged a nervous glance with the boss. That doesn't matter. Yes, it does, Cash insisted, beginning to understand his brother's reasoning. You're looking for something that might not even exist. The nervous young man lowered the gun slightly, clearly confused by the direction of the conversation. Boss, what if they're right? What if there are no documents? Shut up, the boss ordered. Of course, there are documents. Why else would Lucy have disappeared? Maybe, Miriam said softly. She disappeared because you threatened her for no reason. Maybe she was so scared that she preferred to abandon her own daughter rather than risk something happening to Lily. The suggestion hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. If it were true, it meant that this entire pursuit, all this suffering, had been based on paranoia and unfounded fear. Mrs. Davis, who had remained quiet since her betrayal was revealed, finally spoke. You told me that she had stolen evidence of corruption, that she had evidence that could destroy important people. And she does, the boss said, but his voice no longer carried the same conviction as before. Then where is it? Dean challenged. You've spent 5 years looking. You've threatened an innocent woman, forced her to abandon her daughter, destroyed a child's life. And for what? To find drawings of little birds? Lily, who had been quiet during the discussion, suddenly stirred in Miriam's lap. Can I say something? Everyone turned to her, the 4-year-old girl who had been the center of all this confusion. My mom worked making paper at the factory, she said in her clear voice, but she always said that the bosses were good people. She said that one day, when I grew up, maybe I could work in a company like this, with honest people. Lily's words hit Cash like a punch to the stomach. Not only had Lucy not stolen documents, she actually respected and admired the Sullivan family. Then why did she disappear? The boss asked, but now there was doubt in his voice. Because you showed up at her house saying she had stolen things, Lily replied simply. She was very scared. She told Mrs. Davis that she didn't know what you were talking about, but that maybe it would be better to leave to protect me. The fat man began to sweat, realizing the magnitude of the mistake they had made. But someone said that she... Who? Dean interrupted. Who exactly said that Lucy had stolen something? The silence that followed was revealing. The boss and his men exchanged nervous glances, clearly realizing that they had been manipulated. It was the nervous young man who finally spoke. It was the old company accountant. He said he had noticed discrepancies in the books and that he suspected the secretary had access to information she could use against you. Which accountant? Cash asked. Renato Silva. He said you had hired him to investigate internal leaks. Cash and Dean looked at each other, a sudden and terrible understanding passing between them. Renato Silva had been the company's accountant during the last years of their father's life. He had been fired by Dean 6 months after they took over the company when they discovered irregularities in his accounting. Renato never worked for us after we took over the company, Dean said slowly. We fired him for theft. What? The boss seemed genuinely confused now. You were tricked, Cash said. Renato convinced you that Lucy had stolen documents because he wanted to get revenge on our family. He probably hoped you would cause problems for us. The realization of the truth spread through the office like a wave. 5 years of persecution, a woman forced to abandon her daughter, a child living on the streets, all based on the lie of a vengeful man. The fat man slumped heavily into a chair. This can't be happening. It is happening, Miriam said firmly. And now you have to decide how you're going to fix the damage you've done. The boss put away the gun, his posture changing completely. The menacing authority had disappeared, replaced by something that looked like shame. How do we find Lucy? He asked. Why do you want to find her? Cash questioned suspiciously. To apologize. To explain that it was all a misunderstanding. Lily, who had followed the entire conversation with impressive attention for her age, suddenly perked up. "Are you going to bring my mom back?" The hope in the girl's voice made everyone's heart ache. How to explain to a 4-year-old child that even if they found Lucy, years of separation and trauma could not be easily erased? "We'll try, sweetie," the boss said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "But it may take time." Mrs. Davis, who had remained quiet throughout the revelation, finally approached Lily. Can I apologize?" Lily looked at her for a long moment, then held out her small arms. Mrs. Davis hugged her, tears running down her wrinkled face. "I was so scared," Mrs. Davis whispered. "They said they were going to hurt my own family if I didn't help." "It's okay, Grandma Davis," Lily said, showing a capacity for forgiveness that humbled all the adults present. In the next 2 hours, the details of how to undo the 5-year mistake were discussed. The boss, who revealed himself to be named Marcos, explained that he worked for a group of businessmen who had been convinced by Renato that the Sullivan family possessed compromising evidence against them. "Renato showed us fake documents," Marcos explained. "He said that Lucy had access to information about money laundering and that she was planning to blackmail them." "And you believed it without investigating?" Dean asked. "We were younger, more impulsive." "And Renato was convincing." The nervous young man who introduced himself as Bruno revealed that he had only recently joined the group and that he had never felt comfortable with the violent methods. "I just wanted the money," he admitted. "But when I saw the girl, it's not right." The fat man, named Tadeo, remained silent for most of the conversation, clearly dealing with the guilt of what he had done. When the sun began to rise, a plan had been formed. Marcos would use his contacts to try to locate Lucy, while Cash and Dean would work to rebuild the damage to the company caused by the months of threats and instability. Lily, exhausted by everything she had been through, was sleeping in Miriam's lap when they made the final agreement. "What if we can't find Lucy?" Miriam asked. "Then," Cash said, looking at the sleeping girl, "we'll raise Lily as our own daughter, as it always should have been." But none of them imagined that Lucy was closer than they thought, and that her reaction to the discovery that her daughter had gone through so much suffering would be very different from what they expected. 2 weeks had passed since the revelation at the factory, and life had taken on a strange routine in the small town of Harmony Creek. Lily officially lived with Miriam, but spent most of her time divided between the nurse's house and daily visits from Cash and Dean. The brothers had become constant figures in her life, bringing toys, books, and especially the affection that the girl had lost with her mother's disappearance. The factory, which had faced serious problems during the months of instability, was slowly beginning to recover. Marcos and his men had used their contacts to undo some of the rumors circulating about the company, and gradually customers began to return. "Uncle Cash," Lily said on a sunny morning, while they were playing in Miriam's yard, "why doesn't my mom come home?" The question, asked with the innocence typical of a 4-year-old child, still hurt the hearts of all the adults. Cash knelt beside her, carefully choosing his words. "Because she doesn't know it's safe to come back, sweetie. When people get very scared, sometimes it takes them a while to understand that the danger has passed." "But can't you call her? Tell her I miss her. We're trying to find a way to talk to her." It was a half-truth. Marcos had mobilized all his contacts in the region, but locating someone who didn't want to be found was proving more difficult than expected. Lucy had disappeared completely, leaving only vague traces that led to dead ends. That afternoon, while Lily was taking her daily nap, Miriam received an unexpected visitor. A simple-looking woman, wearing a scarf on her head and worn clothes, knocked timidly on the door. "Good afternoon. Are you Miriam Caldwell?" "Yes, I am. Can I help you?" "My name is Rosa. I work on a farm in Charleston. I heard that you are looking for a woman named Lucy Miller." Miriam's heart raced. "Do you know her?" "I've been working with her for 3 years. She takes care of the owner's children and helps in the kitchen." Miriam immediately called Cash, who arrived in 15 minutes accompanied by Dean. Rosa repeated her story. Lucy worked on a secluded farm using the false name of Maria Silva and never talked about her past. But yesterday, Rosa continued, she received a letter. After reading it, she started crying a lot. She said she had to go home, that her daughter was in danger. A letter from whom? Dean asked. I don't know. But this morning she took a bus here. She should arrive at the bus station at 6 in the afternoon. Cash looked at his watch. It was 4:30. We have an hour and a half. Do you think we should take Lily? Miriam asked. No, Dean said readily. If Lucy is really coming back because she thinks Lily is in danger, seeing her daughter suddenly could cause a huge shock. I agree, Cash said. I better go alone first. Explain the situation. At 5:30, Cash was at the small bus station in Harmony Creek, as nervous as he had ever been in his life. How to explain to a desperate mother that her daughter had spent months on the streets because she had fled from a threat that never existed? The bus arrived punctually at 6, bringing half a dozen passengers. Cash recognized Lucy immediately, even with her hair grayer and her face marked by years of worry. She got off the bus carrying only a small bag, her eyes anxiously looking for something or someone. Lucy! She turned, and for a moment she didn't recognize him. Then her eyes widened with surprise and fear. Mr. Sullivan. What? How? I need to talk to you. It's about Lily. The name of her daughter made Lucy pale. Where is she? The letter said she was in danger, that bad men were looking for her. She's safe, but I need to explain some things. Can you come with me? During the 20-minute walk to Miriam's house, Cash told the whole story, from the day they found Lily on the road to the discovery that it had all been a setup by Renato Silva. Lucy listened in silence, tears streaming constantly down her face. My daughter lived on the streets, she murmured when Cash finished. For 3 years she lived on the streets because I ran away from ghosts. You couldn't have known. Yes, I could have. I should have sought help. I should have faced those men. I should have... Her voice broke into sobs. Lucy, the important thing is that now we know the truth. And Lily is fine. She's healthy. She's loved. Loved by strangers because her own mother abandoned her. When they arrived at Miriam's house, Lily was playing in the yard, building houses with sticks and stones. She didn't see her mother approaching, too focused on her game. Lucy stopped at the gate, watching the daughter she hadn't seen in 5 years. Lily had grown, obviously, but she still had the same big, expressive eyes that Lucy remembered from her nightmare nights. She's so big, Lucy whispered, and so smart. Lucy, you created an extraordinary girl. At that moment, Lily looked up and saw 2 figures standing at the gate. She recognized Cash immediately, but it took a few seconds to process who the woman next to him was. When she finally understood, her face went through a series of emotions: surprise, joy, confusion, and finally a caution that broke the hearts of all present. "Mom," she said, her voice small and uncertain. Lucy knelt down, opening her arms. "My little one, my little star." But Lily didn't run into her mother's arms as everyone expected. Instead, she took a few hesitant steps, then stopped. "Are you going to leave again?" she asked. The question hit Lucy like a stab wound. "No, my daughter, never again." "Promise?" "I promise." Only then did Lily run into her mother's arms, and the reunion that everyone had imagined finally happened. Mother and daughter hugged in the middle of the yard, crying and laughing at the same time. Miriam, who watched from the porch, wiped away her own tears. "Come inside," she said softly. "Let's talk." The following hours were emotionally intense. Lucy apologized repeatedly to Lily, to Miriam, to the Sullivan brothers. She told about the 3 years of nightmare, working on distant farms, always afraid of being found, always dreaming of the day she could return to fetch her daughter. "I received anonymous letters," she explained, "saying that if I came back, Something bad would happen to Lily. I believed they were from the men who threatened me. They were probably from Renato, Dean said. He wanted to keep you away so your story wouldn't be questioned. Where is he now? Lucy asked, a cold anger in her voice. He disappeared when everything came to light, but Marcos and the others are looking for him. Lily, who had spent most of the conversation glued to Lucy, finally asked the question everyone feared. Mommy, where are we going to live now? Lucy looked around, at Miriam, who had cared for her daughter as if she were her own, at Cash and Dean, who had become father figures for Lily, at the simple house that had become the first real home her daughter had known in years. Where do you want to live, little star? Lily thought for a moment, then said something that surprised everyone. I want to live with everyone. With you, with Aunt Miriam, with Uncle Cash, and Uncle Dean. Like a big family. The innocence of the suggestion made everyone smile through their tears, but Lucy knew that reality was more complicated. She had no home, no job, no nothing but love for her daughter. Lucy, Cash said gently, if you want, you can go back to work at the factory. We pay a better salary now, and you could live in a house near town. And I, Miriam added, would love to continue taking care of Lily when you're working. If you don't mind. Lucy looked at all those people who had cared for her daughter when she couldn't. Instead of the anger or jealousy she might have felt, she found herself filled with deep gratitude. You would do that? After everything that happened? Lucy, Dean said, your daughter saved our family in many ways. It's the least we can do. That night, for the first time in 5 years, Lily slept in her mother's arms. But what none of them knew was that Renato Silva had returned to town, and that his thirst for revenge had only increased with the failure of his original plan. 3 weeks after Lucy's reunion with Lily, life seemed to have finally found a balance. Lucy had resumed her work at the factory, this time as an administrative supervisor, earning a salary that allowed her to rent a small but comfortable house 2 blocks from Miriam's house. Lily divided her time between the 2 houses, creating a routine that made her feel truly loved and safe. Mommy, can I have dinner at Aunt Miriam's house today? Lily asked one morning, while Lucy was preparing her breakfast. Of course, little star. But come back early, because tomorrow we have to go to town to buy your school supplies. The mention of school made Lily's eyes shine. After years on the streets, the prospect of attending regular classes, making friends her age, and learning new things was like a dream come true. Lucy watched her daughter run towards Miriam's house, her heart still clenching whenever Lily left her sight. The trauma of having lost her for so long had created a constant anxiety that she struggled to control. At the factory, the work environment had improved dramatically. The employees, who initially greeted Lucy with distrust due to the rumors about her previous disappearance, now respected her for the competence and dedication she demonstrated. Cash and Dean had strived to create a transparent environment where the mistakes of the past could be discussed openly. Lucy, Cash said that morning, entering her office, I need to talk to you about something important. Has something happened to Lily? She asked immediately, panic already setting in her voice. No, Lily is fine. It's about something else. He closed the door behind him. Last night, someone tried to break into my house. Lucy felt her blood run cold. Did they take anything? They couldn't get in, but they left a message under the door. Cash took a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. It says, you should have accepted the first offer. Now the price has gone up. Renato. It can only be him. Marcos and his men have been looking for him for weeks, but it's like he's disappeared off the face of the earth. Lucy stood up, walking to the window overlooking the factory yard. He won't give up, will he? Even knowing that we discovered the truth, he still wants to get revenge. It seems so. That's why I need to ask you, do you remember anything else about the time you worked here before? Any detail that can help us understand why Renato is so obsessed with hurting us? Lucy closed her eyes, forcing her memory to go back 5 years in time. I remember that he was always strange with me. He asked questions about my work, about the files I organized. Once he asked me to make a copy of some financial documents, said it was for his own control. What documents? Contracts with suppliers, mostly. And, wait, Lucy turned, a sudden memory popping into her mind. There was one specific supplier that he always asked about, a lumber company called Pereira and Sons. Cash frowned. I've never heard of that company, because it only existed on paper. I discovered this by accident when I tried to check the address in a phone book. The address was fake. The phone didn't exist. And did you tell anyone? I told your father. He said he would investigate, but a few days later, Renato called me in private. He said I was being too curious, that it would be better to focus on my own work. A terrible understanding began to form in Cash's mind. Lucy, do you think Renato was diverting money through this phantom company? Now that I think about it, yes. He must have created a fake company to issue fraudulent invoices, diverting the money that should go to real suppliers. And when you found out, he realized you were a threat. Lucy nodded slowly. That's why he invented the story about me having stolen documents. He needed to get me out of the way before I discovered more things. At that moment, Cash's phone rang. It was Miriam, and there was panic in her voice. Cash, come here immediately. Lily has disappeared. The phone slipped from Cash's hand, falling to the floor with a thud. Lucy, seeing the look of horror on his face, felt her legs weaken. What is it? What happened to my daughter? She disappeared. They ran to the car, driving at a dangerous speed along the dirt roads leading to Miriam's house. When they arrived, they found the nurse in a state of despair, being comforted by Dean and Mrs. Davis. She was playing in the yard, Miriam explained through tears. I went in to prepare lunch. When I came back, she was no longer there. I searched everywhere. I shouted her name. How long ago? Lucy asked, trying to keep her voice controlled. An hour, maybe more. Dean showed a piece of paper that had been left at the gate. We found this. The message was simple and terrible. If you want the girl back, bring all the company's financial documents from the last 10 years. Alone. Tonight, midnight, at the old abandoned sawmill on the mountain road. He took my daughter, Lucy whispered, the horror of the situation fully setting in. He took my little star. Cash held her shoulders. We'll bring her back, I promise. How? He wants documents that can incriminate our own company, and even if we hand them over, we have no guarantee that he will return Lily. It was Dean who made the decision. Let's call Marcos. He and the other men know how to handle situations like this. No, Lucy protested. The note says to go alone. If he realizes we brought help. Lucy's right, Mrs. Davis agreed. Renato is desperate. Desperate people do unthinkable things. During the following hours, they carefully planned what to do. They decided that Cash and Lucy would go to the meeting carrying a folder with documents, some real, others faked, to look more compromising than they really were. Dean would provide support at a safe distance, ready to intervene if necessary. Meanwhile, somewhere unknown, Lily was sitting on a small chair, her hands tied, but not hurt. Renato had made sure that she was not injured. He still needed her as a bargaining chip. Why did you bring me here? She asked, her voice small but surprisingly firm. Because the adults who take care of you did something very bad to me, Renato replied, avoiding looking directly at her. They don't do bad things. They are good people. They took away my job. They left me with no money to take care of my own family. Lily considered this for a moment. But why didn't you look for another job? The innocent question from a 4-year-old hit Renato harder than any accusation could have done. For a moment he hesitated, questioning his own actions. It's not that simple. My mom looked for other jobs when she was out of work. She didn't hurt anyone for it. Your mother doesn't understand how the world works. Yes, she does. She said that when things get bad, we have to work harder, not hurt other people. Renato moved away from the girl, disturbed by the simple wisdom she demonstrated. He had convinced himself that his revenge was justified, but Lily's words planted a seed of doubt in his mind. When the clock struck 11:30 at night, Cash and Lucy were on their way to the abandoned sawmill. The mountain road was dark and deserted, illuminated only by the car's headlights. "What if it's a trap?" Lucy asked for the 10th time. "Then we'll face it together," Cash replied. "Lucy, no matter what happens tonight, I want you to know that Lily will always have a family that loves her." "Don't talk like that. She's going to be okay. We're all going to be okay." But when they arrived at the sawmill and saw the sinister silhouette of the abandoned buildings against the night sky, they both felt that the night might end very differently than they expected. The sawmill had been closed for over 10 years, and nature had already begun to reclaim the space. Climbing plants covered the walls, and the smell of rotting wood permeated the air. They parked where Renato had instructed and walked towards the main building, carrying the folder with documents. With each step, Lucy's heart beat faster, and only a silent prayer kept her standing, that her daughter was safe and that this night of nightmare would finally end. The abandoned sawmill loomed before them like a sleeping monster, its rotting wooden structures creating menacing shadows under the dim moonlight. Cash and Lucy walked slowly towards the main building, each step echoing in the silence of the night. "Renato!" Cash shouted when they reached the entrance. "We're here! We brought what you asked for!" For a few seconds, only the sound of the wind through the trees responded. Then a faint light turned on inside the building, and Renato's voice echoed from within. "Come in, slowly, and keep your hands where I can see them." They pushed the creaking door and entered what had once been the sawmill's office. Renato was in the center of the room, holding a flashlight that illuminated his face, creating deep shadows on his features. Next to him, in a small chair, was Lily. The girl looked scared, but not hurt. "Mommy!" Lily shouted, trying to get up, but Renato placed his hand on her shoulder, keeping her seated. "Calm down, little one. You'll be reunited soon." Renato looked at the folder that Cash was carrying. "Did you bring everything I asked for?" "We brought it," Cash said, taking a step forward. "Now let her go. First, I want to see the documents." Cash opened the folder, revealing stacks of papers organized into folders. 10 years of financial records, as you asked. Contracts, balance sheets, everything. Renato approached, keeping a safe distance, and began to leaf through the documents with one hand, the other always close to Lily. His eyes gleamed when he saw some of the older papers. "Finally," he murmured. "Finally, I'll be able to prove what you did." "Renato," Lucy said softly, "you don't need to do this. Lily is just a child. She has nothing to do with the problems between us." "She has everything to do with it," Renato exploded. "You used her to incriminate me. You spread lies about me all over town." "Nobody spread lies," Cash protested. "You were fired because you were stealing from the company. I was compensating for the miserable salaries you paid, creating opportunities that you would never give me." "Creating phantom companies and diverting money," Lucy corrected. "That's not creating opportunities, Renato. It's theft. And what you did to me wasn't theft. You stole my dignity, my livelihood, my future." Lily, who had been quiet until then, suddenly spoke. "Mr. Renato, do you have children?" The unexpected question made Renato stop his angry tirade. "I do. 2 girls. Do they know that you brought me here?" Renato hesitated. "That's none of your business." "Would they be sad if they knew that you made a girl like them cry?" Lily's innocent questioning hit Renato in an unexpected way. He looked at the child, really saw her for the first time, not as a tool for revenge, but as a small and scared person who just wanted to go home. I would never hurt you," he said defensively. "But you brought me to a haunted place and tied my hands. Isn't that hurting?" Lucy watched the interaction with a mixture of pride and terror. Her daughter was trying to reach Renato's humanity, but he was still unpredictably dangerous. Renato, Lucy said carefully, you have the documents now. You can do whatever you want with them. But let Lily go home. She needs sleep. She needs safety. Nobody's going anywhere until I'm sure these documents are real. Renato started to examine the papers more closely, and gradually his expression changed from satisfaction to confusion, then to anger. These are copies, altered documents. He threw the papers on the floor. You think I'm an idiot? They're the documents you asked for, Cash said firmly. If they don't work for what you want, that's your problem. My problem. Renato laughed bitterly. The problem is that you never took me seriously, always treated me like a disposable employee. You were a good accountant, Lucy said, until you started stealing. Then you became disposable. I didn't steal, Renato shouted, making Lily cower in her chair. I took what they owed me. Nobody owed you anything, Cash retorted. You received a fair salary for your work. Fair? You inherited a company. I built my career from scratch. I deserved more recognition, more money, more respect. Then you should have asked for a raise, not created shell corporations. At that moment, Lily stood up from the chair, her little hands still tied, but her voice firm and clear. Mr. Renato, are you yelling because you're scared? The question made everyone stop. Renato looked at the girl, his anger momentarily replaced by surprise. Scared? I'm not afraid of anything. My mommy says that when people yell a lot, it's because they're scared inside. Are you scared that your daughters won't like you anymore? Renato felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. How could a 4-year-old see through all his anger and find the fear he was trying to hide? My daughters, they don't know where I am, he admitted, his voice losing strength. Are they worried? Probably. Then maybe you should go home. They need their daddy, just like I need my mommy. Lucy held her breath, watching her daughter try to reach the humanity of the man who had kidnapped her. It was a display of courage and wisdom that left her proud and terrified at the same time. Renato looked at Lily, then at the documents scattered on the floor, and finally at Cash and Lucy. For a moment it seemed that the anger had completely dissipated. I just wanted you to admit that you treated me badly. Renato, Cash said softly, if you felt disrespected, I'm sorry. But that doesn't justify what you did, not to me and Dean, not to Lucy, and especially not to Lily. I never wanted to hurt the little girl. But you did, Lucy said, just like you hurt me when you forced me to abandon her. Just like you hurt all the factory employees with your lies. Renato lowered his head, and for the first time in years, he seemed to truly see the destruction he had caused. Not just to the company's finances or the Sullivan family's reputation, but to real people. A mother separated from her daughter, a child living on the streets, employees worried about their jobs. I messed everything up, he murmured. It's not too late to fix it, Lily said, approaching him with her little hands still tied. You can untie my hands and take me home. Then your daughters won't be worried anymore. Renato looked at Lily's tied hands, and for the first time really saw what he had done. He had kidnapped an innocent child. He had become exactly the kind of person he would try to protect his own daughters from. With slow and hesitant movements, he untied the ropes from Lily's wrists. The girl rubbed her hands to restore circulation, but did not immediately run into her mother's arms. Thank you, Mr. Renato, she said politely. Now you can go home too. I can't, he said, tears starting to run down his face. I did too many bad things. The police will arrest me. Maybe, Lily agreed with the brutal honesty of childhood, but your daughters will still need their daddy, even if you have to be away for a while. Cash watched the scene in amazement. Lily was literally teaching forgiveness and responsibility to the man who had kidnapped her. Renato, he said, if you turn yourself in voluntarily, if you return the money you stole, maybe things won't be as bad as you think. You won't press charges for kidnapping? Lucy looked at Lily, who had approached her but was still watching Renato with compassion. If you commit to seeking help, therapy, treatment for this obsession with revenge, maybe we can find a way to resolve this without completely destroying your life. Why? After everything I've done? Because, Lily said, everyone deserves a second chance. My mommy taught me that. At that moment, in the abandoned sawmill, 3 adults learned about forgiveness from a 4-year-old who had suffered more than any of them, but still managed to see goodness in people who had hurt her. Renato knelt in front of Lily. "Can you forgive me?" "I already forgave you," she said simply. "Now can we all go home?" And so, a night that could have ended in tragedy turned into the first real step towards healing for everyone involved. The 2 months that followed the confrontation at the sawmill brought changes that no one had anticipated. Renato had voluntarily surrendered to the authorities, confessing not only the kidnapping, but also the embezzlement scheme he had operated years earlier. His cooperation and Lily's testimony about the genuine remorse he had shown resulted in a lighter sentence, 2 years in prison and the obligation to return all the stolen money. But the unexpected consequences of the story that spread through town created new problems for the family that Lily had reunited. "It's not fair," Dean said on a tense morning in the factory office, throwing a local newspaper on the table. "Look at this headline. Local businessman used child as bait-in-trap for former employee." Cash picked up the newspaper, reading aloud, "Sources close to the case suggest that the Sullivan family orchestrated the entire incident to frame Renato Silva, using a minor as a central piece in a dangerous game of corporate revenge." "Who is spreading these lies?" asked Lucy, who had arrived at the office to discuss the company's growing problems. "Competitors," Dean replied bitterly. "People who saw an opportunity to attack us while we're vulnerable." The Sullivan factory had lost 3 major contracts in recent weeks. Long-time clients cited concerns about the company's stability and ethical issues involving management. The rumor that they had used a child in a dangerous scheme had spread faster than the truth. "Dad always said that a reputation takes decades to build and can be destroyed in days," Cash murmured. "And what are we going to do?" asked Lucy. "I have a daughter to support, and you guys have employees depending on this company." At that moment, Miriam entered the office bringing Lily, who had insisted on accompanying her to town, to see her uncles. The girl, now almost 5 years old, had developed a keen sense of the tensions of the adults around her. "Why is everyone sad?" she asked, observing the somber expressions. "We're facing some problems at work, little one," Cash explained, trying to smile. "Is it because of me?" Lily's direct question made everyone uncomfortable. "Of course not," Lucy said quickly. "Why would you think that?" "Because I heard the lady at the market saying that you did something bad to me, that you used me to hurt Mr. Renato." The silence that followed was heavy. Miriam knelt beside Lily, holding her little hands. "Honey, sometimes people say things they don't understand, right? No one here used you to hurt anyone." "I know," Lily said with her usual seriousness, "but the other people don't know. And is that making you run out of money?" Lily's ability to understand complex situations continued to surprise everyone. Dean sighed, deciding to be honest with her. "A little, yes. Some people believe the bad stories about us and don't want to do business with our factory anymore." Lily thought for a moment, then made a suggestion that shocked everyone present. "What if I talked to these people? Told them what really happened?" "Lily, you can't do that," Lucy protested. "That's too much pressure for a child." "But I was there. I know the truth." "Little one," Cash said gently, "you shouldn't have to worry about adult problems." "But there are family problems," Lily replied with simple logic, "and families help each other." That afternoon, while Lily was playing in Miriam's yard, the adults continued to discuss the deteriorating situation of the company. It had reached the point where layoffs would be inevitable if they couldn't reverse the situation quickly. "Maybe we should consider selling," Dean suggested. "Cut our losses before it gets even worse." "Sell to whom?" Cash asked. Nobody's going to want to buy a company with our current reputation." It was then that Mrs. Davis appeared at the door, carrying a basket of vegetables from her yard. Since the incident at the sawmill, she had become a constant presence, trying to compensate for her previous betrayal with small but constant gestures of affection. "Sorry to interrupt," she said hesitantly, "but I heard you talking about the factory's problems." "News spreads fast in a small town," Miriam commented with a sigh. "That's true, but maybe that can be used to our advantage too." Everyone looked at Mrs. Davis with curiosity. "Explain," Dean asked. "Well, everyone in town knows Lily now. They've seen how special she is, how smart and brave. If she really wanted to tell her version of the story—" "We've already said we're not going to put a child in the middle of this," Lucy interrupted firmly. "But what if it wasn't putting? What if it was just letting her do what she already wants to do naturally?" Before anyone could answer, Lily appeared at the door, her clothes dirty with dirt and a radiant smile on her face. "Aunt Miriam, can I plant some flowers in the front garden? To make the house prettier?" "Of course you can, honey. And can I make a sign saying they're Lily's flowers, so people will know I planted them?" Miriam smiled. "You sure can." "See," Mrs. Davis said quietly to the other adults. "She's not ashamed to be known. She's not afraid of people talking about her. Maybe we can learn something from that." That night, after Lily fell asleep, Lucy made a decision that surprised everyone. "Tomorrow, I'm going to the local newspaper," she announced. "I'm going to give an interview telling exactly what happened, not as a company employee, but as Lily's mother." "Lucy, are you sure?" Cash asked. "It could be risky to expose yourself like that. More risky than letting lies destroy the people who saved my daughter." "I don't think so. What if the reporters ask difficult questions? About why you abandoned Lily, about the years she spent on the streets?" Lucy took a deep breath. "Then I'll answer with the truth, all of it, even if it's painful." The next day, Lucy's interview was published on the front page of the Harmony Creek Gazette. She told the whole story, from her escape 5 years ago to the recent reunion with her daughter. She talked about the months Lily spent on the streets, about the kindness of Miriam, Cash, and Dean, and about how Renato had manipulated everyone through fear and revenge. "My daughter taught forgiveness to the man who kidnapped her," Lucy said in the interview. "If a 4-year-old can show such wisdom and compassion, maybe we should all learn from her about giving second chances and seeing the truth instead of believing in rumors." The town's reaction was immediate and unexpected. Instead of skepticism, there was a wave of sympathy. People began to remember their own stories of Lily, how she helped at the market, how she greeted everyone politely, how her drawings of colorful birds appeared in the most unlikely places in town. Mrs. Rosa, owner of the largest fabric store in the region, was the first to approach the factory. "I read the newspaper article," she told Dean, "and I remembered when I met Lily at the market months ago. A special child like that doesn't come from a bad family. I want to renew my contract for store furniture." In a week, 3 of the lost contracts had been renewed. But the real surprise came when Lily, playing in Miriam's yard, made a discovery that would change everything once again. "Aunt Miriam!" she shouted, running into the house with something in her hands. "I found something buried under the big tree." It was a small metal box, rusted with time. Inside it, wrapped in plastic, were documents that would make Renato look like an amateur compared to what they revealed. Documents signed by the twins' own father, showing financial transactions that no one had ever suspected existed. "My God," Cash murmured when they saw the contents. "Dad really was involved in something illegal." "And he buried the evidence in Miriam's yard," Dean said, still processing the discovery. "This changes everything," Lucy realized. "If this information gets to the wrong people—" Lily, who had made the discovery, watched the adults with curiosity. "Are these papers important?" she asked. "Very important, little one," Miriam replied. "Important enough to cause very big problems." Then maybe it's better to burn them, Lily suggested, with her simple logic. So no one gets angry. The adults looked at each other, realizing that a 5-year-old had just suggested the wisest solution to a problem that could destroy not only their family, but several other people in town. But would burning the documents be ethical? What if other people deserved to know the truth about what had happened years ago? The decision on what to do with the documents found by Lily tortured the adults for 3 whole days. The metal box remained on Miriam's kitchen table like a silent time bomb, its contents threatening to explode the fragile peace they had achieved. "We can't just ignore this," Dean insisted in the morning, leafing through the compromising papers again. "If Dad really was laundering money for corrupt politicians, other people have the right to know. And destroy the lives of entire families in the process," Cash retorted. "Dean, some of these names are people we've known since we were kids, people with children, grandchildren, people who benefited from dirty money," reminded Lucy, who had arrived early that morning. "And what if there are other Renatos out there, other people suffering because of the crimes these documents prove?" Miriam, who had spent the night almost without sleep, served coffee to everyone with slightly trembling hands. "What if Lily's suggestion is the wisest? Burn everything and leave the past in the past." "That would be covering up crimes," Dean said. "That would be protecting innocence," Cash corrected. Lily, who had woken up early and overheard part of the discussion from the bedroom door, appeared in the kitchen, still in her pajamas, holding her favorite doll. "Are you still talking about the papers?" she asked, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "We're trying to decide what's the right thing to do," Miriam explained, lifting Lily into her arms. "And what do you think is right?" The simple question of a 5-year-old exposed the moral complexity of the dilemma they faced. Everyone had a different opinion about what would be right. "It's complicated, little one," Lucy said. "Sometimes there isn't a right or wrong answer." "My school teacher says there always is," Lily replied. "She says we just need to ask, is this going to help more people or hurt more people?" The adults looked at each other, impacted by the child's simple but profound wisdom. "And what do you think, Lily?" Cash asked. "Are these papers going to help more people or hurt more people?" Lily thought seriously, swinging her little legs while staying in Miriam's arms. "They're going to hurt the bad people who did wrong things, but they're also going to hurt their families, who maybe don't know they did bad things, and they're going to hurt you too, because they're going to say you knew and didn't tell before." "That's true," Dean admitted. "But," Lily continued, "if you burn the papers and someone finds out later, they're going to say you hid them on purpose. Then they're going to hurt you the same way." Lily's analysis was so logical and comprehensive that it left everyone speechless for a few moments. "So what do you suggest?" Lucy asked. "Maybe you should ask other people, smart people who know about laws and stuff like that." At that moment, Mrs. Davis knocked on the door, bringing fresh bread as she had done every morning since she had redeemed herself from her betrayal. "Good morning, everyone. Wow, what serious faces are those?" Miriam quickly explained the situation, showing some of the less compromising documents to Mrs. Davis. "My God," the older woman whispered. "Osvaldo was really involved in all this." "He was," Cash confirmed bitterly, "and now we don't know what to do with this information." Mrs. Davis sat down heavily in a chair, the weight of the revelation evident in her expression. "You know, I knew Osvaldo for 30 years. He was a good man day to day, helped the neighbors, treated the employees well. But I always knew he had a side, let's say, too pragmatic." "Does that excuse what he did?" Dean asked. "Of course not. But it makes me think, what if you handed these documents over to someone you trust? Someone who could decide what to do with them fairly?" "Who?" Lucy asked. "The district attorney, Dr. Albert Mendez. He's an honest man, known for being fair but firm." Lily, who had been quiet, suddenly perked up. "I know him. He's the man who always buys ice cream for the children in the square." "Exactly," Mrs. Davis confirmed. If anyone can decide what to do with this information in a way that causes the least possible damage, it's him. The suggestion seemed sensible to everyone, but there was still hesitation in the air. And what if he decides to prosecute everyone listed in these documents, Cash asked. Then it will be his decision, based on the law, not ours, Dean replied. At least our conscience will be clear. And our family? Cash questioned. Our company. When people find out that Dad was involved in this, they're going to assume we were too. Not necessarily, said a new voice from the door. Everyone turned to see Marcos entering, accompanied by young Bruno. The two former bad guys had become regular visitors, trying to help the family in every possible way as a form of penance. Sorry for the intrusion, Marcos said, but the door was open and we heard worried voices. Marcos, you know these legal issues well, Miriam said. What do you think we should do? Marcos examined some of the documents, his face becoming progressively more serious. These are pretty compromising, he said finally. But you have an advantage. It's Osvaldo's own children who are handing over the evidence. That shows character, shows that you choose to do the right thing even when it's difficult. And what if that's not enough to protect our reputation? Cash insisted. Then you'll face the consequences knowing you did the right thing, Bruno said. And believe me, that makes a difference. I spent years doing the wrong thing for money. Now that I'm trying to do the right thing, I sleep better at night. Lily, who had watched the entire discussion carefully, suddenly climbed down from Miriam's lap and approached the table where the documents were. Can I see the papers? Of course, little one, Lucy said. But you can't read those difficult words. I don't want to read. I just want to see. Lily picked up one of the documents and observed it attentively, her small eyes scanning the lines of text as if she were looking for something specific. Does this paper have Grandpa Osvaldo's handwriting? She asked. It does, Cash confirmed, surprised by the question. And did he write that he did bad things? He wrote that he participated in businesses that weren't honest. Lily nodded gravely, then picked up another document. And this one? This one is about money that ended up in accounts it shouldn't have. Lily continued to examine the papers for a few minutes, then carefully placed them back on the table. You know, she said with her usual seriousness, at school the teacher says that when someone does something wrong, they have to own up to it and apologize, even if it's difficult. But Lily, Cash said gently, Grandpa Osvaldo isn't here anymore to own up to what he did. No, but you are, and you're his family. The silence that followed was profound. A 5-year-old had just articulated something that none of the adults had managed to express clearly. They had a moral responsibility not only to the present, but to the mistakes of their family's past. She's right, Dean said finally. We can't fix what Dad did, but we can take responsibility for it. And if that ruins our company, Cash asked one last time. Then we'll build another one, Dean replied with determination. A truly clean company that Lily can be proud of when she grows up. Lucy smiled, seeing the brothers finally united in a difficult moral decision. When you talk like that, I can see why Lily loves you so much. It's decided then, Miriam said. We're going to contact Dr. Albert and hand over the documents. Can I come along? Lily asked. I promise to be very quiet. Of course you can, Cash said, picking her up. After all, you're the one who found all this. And you're the one who taught us that doing the right thing is more important than doing the easy thing. As they prepared to leave, none of them imagined that the decision to hand over the documents would unleash a series of events that would change not only their lives, but the entire political and social dynamics of Harmony Creek. And at the center of it all, a 5-year-old girl who had transformed every adult around her through her innocent wisdom and her generous heart. Dr. Albert Mendez' office was in the center of Harmony Creek, in a colonial building that housed the town's courthouse. When they arrived that afternoon, Lily firmly held Cash's hand, carrying a small bag where she had insisted on putting some of her drawings to show the doctor. "Dr. Mendez," Cash said when they were received in the spacious and airy room, "we brought something you need to see. It's about my father, Osvaldo Sullivan." The district attorney, a man with graying hair and gentle but piercing eyes, gestured for them to sit down. Lily chose the chair closest to the window, from where she could see the movement of the square. "Lily!" Dr. Mendez greeted with a genuine smile. "How is our favorite artist? I hear you draw magnificent birds." "I do," she replied, opening her little bag. "I brought some for you to see after you finished talking to my uncles." Lily's naturalness broke the initial tension, and Dean felt more comfortable starting the explanation. "Doctor, we found documents that prove that our father was involved in illegal activities, money laundering specifically." Dr. Mendez straightened up in his chair, his expression becoming more serious. "What kind of documents?" Cash opened the folder they had brought, carefully removing the papers found by Lily. "False contracts, transfer records, correspondence with people who, well, you'll recognize them." The district attorney examined the documents in silence for several minutes, his expression becoming progressively more grave. Occasionally, he made notes in a pad or asked for clarification on specific dates. "These documents are very serious," he said finally. "They involve people in positions of power who are still active in local politics." "We know," Lucy said. "That's why we came to you. We didn't know what to do." "And why did you decide to hand this over? You could have destroyed everything, and no one would have known." Before any of the adults could answer, Lily spoke up. "Because hiding bad things doesn't make them stop being bad. It just makes us feel heavy in our hearts." Dr. Mendez smiled slightly at the girl. "And where did you learn that, Lily?" "I learned it myself. When I lived on the streets and sometimes took food without asking, I knew it was wrong. Even if no one saw, I knew. And that made me sad inside." "I understand." The district attorney turned his attention to the adults. "Your decision is going to have significant consequences. Some of the people mentioned here are influential. They have resources to defend themselves. And others are innocents who may be harmed," added Miriam. "Families who don't know about the involvement of their loved ones." "That's true, but do you consider that by keeping these crimes secret, other people may be being harmed right now?" The question echoed in the room. Dean remembered Renato, how the undiscovered corruption had created an environment where a desperate employee could become vengeful and dangerous. "Dr. Mendez," Cash said, "we want to do the right thing. But we also want to protect our company and our employees." "Is that possible? Honestly, I don't know. This is going to generate a broad investigation. The regional media is going to be interested. You may face boycotts, lose customers, have financial difficulties. Or," said a voice from the door, "you may gain respect for your courage." Everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was Teresa Campos, owner of the largest chain of furniture stores in the region, and one of the most important clients that the factory had lost in recent weeks. "Mrs. Campos," Dean said, surprised, "what are you doing here?" "I came to resolve some legal issues and ended up hearing part of the conversation." She entered the room with Dr. Mendez's permission. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion." "Of course not," the district attorney said. "In fact, your perspective as a businesswoman in the region may be valuable." Teresa sat down, looking directly at the Sullivan brothers. "Do you know why I cancelled my contract with you?" "Because of the rumors about us using Lily to frame Renato," Cash replied. "Partially, but mainly because I lost confidence in the integrity of the company. I didn't know if you were honest or if you were hiding something." "And now," Dean asked, "now I see a family that is willing to harm themselves financially to do the right thing. That tells me more about your character than any commercial contract." Lily, who had been drawing silently during the conversation, looked up. "Are you going to buy furniture from my uncles again?" Teresa smiled at the girl. "I am, honey, and I'm going to recommend it to other business owners too." Dr. Mendez took some additional notes. Well, it seems you have at least one ally in the business world. But I need to be clear about the process that will follow. He explained that he would initiate a discreet investigation, contacting the people mentioned in the documents to give them an opportunity to explain their version of the facts. Some may cooperate and admit mistakes, others may deny everything and fight legally. The important thing, he said, is that you made the right decision. Regardless of the consequences, you did what your conscience told you to do. And what if our company goes bankrupt because of it? Cash asked. Then you will rebuild with a clear conscience, Lily replied before Dr. Mendez could speak. It's better to be poor and sleep well than to be rich and have nightmares. Everyone in the room was silent for a moment, impressed once again with the girl's wisdom. She's right, Teresa said. And I can guarantee that there are many honest business owners in the region who prefer to do business with people of integrity, even if it costs a little more. 2 weeks later, Dr. Mendez's investigation had begun quietly. To everyone's surprise, 3 of the people mentioned in the documents voluntarily sought out the district attorney to confess their involvement and offer full cooperation. The fear of being discovered was killing them slowly. Dr. Mendez explained during a follow-up meeting. When they learned that there was concrete evidence, they felt relief in finally being able to tell the truth. The voluntary confession of important local politicians created a wave of cleansing in the municipal administration. Instead of a destructive scandal, the case became an example of how to deal with corruption constructively. Our town is becoming a model for other regions, Dr. Mendez commented. And it all started with a family that chose to do the right thing, even when it was difficult. The Sullivan factory not only survived the turbulent period, but thrived. New customers, attracted by the reputation for integrity that the company had earned, more than compensated for the initial losses. You know, Cash said to Lily on a sunny afternoon as they watched the employees working in the factory yard, you saved our company in a way we never imagined. How so, Uncle Cash? You taught us that being honest is more important than being rich, and we discovered that when you're really honest, people trust you, and when people trust you, they want to do business with you. Lily smiled, swinging her little legs in the large office chair. My teacher says it's always like that. Good things come when you do the right things. Your teacher is very wise. She is almost as wise as Aunt Miriam. At that moment, Lucy appeared in the office doorway, bringing an official envelope. A letter arrived for Lily, she said, intrigued. From the mayor's office. Lily, curious, opened the envelope with Cash's help. Inside was an official invitation for her to participate in the inauguration ceremony of the new municipal transparency program, where she would be honored as a little exemplary citizen. They want to give me an award, she asked, not fully understanding the importance. They want to recognize that you did something very important for our town, Lucy explained. But I just told the truth. Everyone should tell the truth. They should, Cash agreed. But not everyone has the courage. That's why you're special. Lily considered this for a moment, then asked a question that touched everyone's heart. If I'm special for telling the truth, does that mean you're special too? Because you also told the truth, even when it was difficult. The question hung in the air, making the adults reflect on how a child managed to see virtues in them that they themselves sometimes doubted they possessed. I think so, Lucy said finally. I think we all became a little special when we decided to do the right thing. Then, Lily said with her simple logic, if everyone did the right thing, would everyone be special? Exactly, Cash replied, hugging her. And maybe that's the best possible world to live in. As the sun set over Harmony Creek, painting the sky with golden hues, an unconventional but deeply united family by love and integrity continued to build a future based on honesty, compassion, and the unexpected wisdom of a girl who had transformed everyone around her. 6 months after the tribute ceremony, life in Harmony Creek had taken on a rhythm that none of those involved in Lily's story could have predicted. The girl, now fully 5 years old, attended the local school with enthusiasm, always carrying a backpack full of drawings of colorful birds that she distributed generously to classmates and teachers. "Mommy," she said on a sunny Saturday morning, "can I invite everyone to my birthday?" Lucy, who was preparing breakfast in the kitchen of her own home, bought with the stable salary she earned as an administrative supervisor at the factory, smiled at her daughter. "Everyone who, little star?" Uncle Cash, Uncle Dean, Aunt Miriam, Mrs. Davis, Uncle Marcos, Bruno, Teacher Sandra, Dr. Albert. Lily paused to breathe. And Mr. Renato, too. The last addition to the list made Lucy stop stirring the eggs in the pan. "Renato, honey? He's still away." "I know, but can I send him a drawing, so he knows I remember him on my birthday?" Lily's capacity for forgiveness continued to surprise everyone around her. Even after everything she had been through, she remembered Renato not as the man who had kidnapped her, but as someone who had repented and tried to fix his mistakes. "Of course you can, my dear. We'll make a very beautiful drawing for him." That afternoon, Miriam's house, which had become the official meeting point for the extended family, was teeming with preparations. Cash and Dean had arrived early, bringing a new table they had built especially for Lily in the factory workshop. "It's a table just for you to draw," Cash explained, kneeling beside the girl. "It has drawers to store your colored pencils and a special corner for you to sign your drawings." Lily's eyes shone with tears of joy. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever received." "No more than you deserve," said Dean, who had completely transformed since Lily had entered their lives. The formerly reserved and calculating man now smiled easily and always carried candy in his pocket for the girl. Miriam watched the scene from the porch, her heart warmed by the family that had formed so unexpectedly. At 53, she had discovered that being the aunt of a special girl was even better than being a biological mother. "Miriam," said Mrs. Davis, approaching with a chocolate cake she had made especially for the birthday, "have you ever thought about how our life has changed since that girl appeared?" "Every day," Miriam replied. "Sometimes I wonder what would have become of us if Cash and Dean hadn't fainted on that road." "I think Lily would have found another way to teach us what we needed to learn," Mrs. Davis said with conviction. "Girls like her are born to change the world." During the party, which stretched into the evening, each person present shared a story about how Lily had impacted their life. Teresa Campos, who had become a close friend of the family, told how the integrity demonstrated by the Sullivans had inspired other business owners in the region to adopt more transparent practices. "Our town has become a benchmark in business ethics," she said. "And it all started with a girl who found two men passed out on the road." Marcos, who now worked as a security consultant for local companies, spoke about how meeting Lily had changed his perspective on violence and forgiveness. "She taught me that true strength doesn't come from intimidating others, but from protecting those who need protection." Bruno, who had gotten an honest job on a neighboring farm, added, "And she taught me that it's never too late to start over doing the right thing." When it was Dr. Mendez's turn to speak, he knelt in front of Lily. "You know, little one, in 30 years of my career, I've never seen anyone cause so many positive changes just by being good. You didn't make speeches, you didn't write laws, you didn't force anyone to change. You just were yourself, and that was enough to transform our entire town." Lily, a little embarrassed by all the attention, said simply, "I just wanted everyone to be happy." "And you succeeded," Lucy said, hugging her daughter. "Everyone here is happier for knowing you." When the party ended and the guests left, Lily sat at her new table with a blank sheet of paper. Cash, who had stayed to help with the cleaning, approached. "What are you going to draw now?" "A gift for Mr. Renato. I want to send it with the letter you helped me write." The letter, dictated by Lily and written by Cash, was simple but touching. "Dear Mr. Renato, today was my birthday and I remembered you. I hope you are well and that your daughters are not too sad. I made a drawing for you. They are birds flying free, like we will all be one day. With love, Lily." The drawing she was making showed two adult birds flying next to two smaller birds, clearly Renato and his daughters reunited and free. "Do you think he'll like it?" she asked. "I'm sure he will," Cash replied, touched by the girl's continued generosity. 2 weeks later, a response arrived from Renato. It was a drawing made by him in prison, clumsy but clearly made with love, showing Lily surrounded by all the adults who cared for her, with the word "thank you" written in large letters underneath. "He learned to draw too," Lily said, pleased. "Now we can be friends who talk to each other through drawings." The following spring, something extraordinary happened. The story of Lily, the street girl who had transformed an entire town through kindness and wisdom, reached the ears of journalists from a national magazine. They came to Harmony Creek to report on the miracle of the bird girl. "We don't want Lily to become a celebrity," Lucy said firmly when the journalists approached. "She's just a normal child who deserves a normal childhood." "But her story can inspire other people," the main reporter argued. "It can show that even small children can make a difference in the world." It was Lily who made the final decision. "Can I talk to them, Mummy? Maybe other kids who live on the street will see it and know that there are good people in the world." The interview, published 3 months later, touched millions of hearts across the country. But what most impressed readers were not the dramatic details of the story, but the simple and profound wisdom of a 6-year-old girl. "What would you say to other children who are going through difficulties?" the journalist asked. "That there's always someone good nearby, even when we don't see them. And that doing the right thing is always worth it, even when it takes a while for things to get better." And to the adults, that children understand more than they think, and that when adults do something wrong, children get sad. But when adults do something right, children are proud. The report generated hundreds of letters from all over the country, from children in difficult situations, from adults inspired to change their lives, from families who found hope in Lily's story. "Look at this," Dean said one afternoon, showing one of the letters to the girl. "A girl from Chicago wrote that you inspired her to forgive her father who had abandoned the family. And this one," Cash added, "is from a businessman in New York who decided to confess tax evasion after reading your story." Lily listened to the letters with serious attention, then asked, "Can I answer them?" "Of course, but there are a lot of letters, little one." "Then I'm going to make a very big drawing with a lot of birds to send to everyone, so they'll know I'm thinking of them." And that's exactly what she did. With the help of her extended family, Lily created a mural drawing showing hundreds of colorful birds flying towards the sun, each carrying a message of hope and love. Copies were sent to each person who had written, spreading even more joy across the country. A year after the publication of the report, on a golden autumn afternoon, Lily was sitting at her special table in Miriam's yard, drawing as she always did. Around her, her family, Lucy, Miriam, Cash, Dean, Mrs. Davis, and even Marcos and Bruno, who had joined for a barbecue, talked animatedly about the plans for the expansion of the factory and the social projects they had begun to develop in the town. "Lily," said Lucy, watching the drawing her daughter was making, "what is that?" "It's our family," she replied, showing a drawing that represented all the important people in her life, including some who she hadn't even met personally yet, like Renato and his daughters, and even some of the children who had written letters to her. "But are we that many people?" "We are," Lily said certainly. "Family isn't just who lives in the same house. Family is who cares about you and who you care about." As the sun set over Harmony Creek, painting the sky with the same colors as the birds Lily drew, everyone present felt the profound truth of her words. A girl who had started life abandoned on the streets had created the broadest, most loving, and most united family that any of them could have imagined. And in the process, she had taught an entire town that kindness is contagious, that forgiveness is powerful, and that sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest gestures. "You know," Lily said, placing the last colourful touch on her drawing. "I think the birds are right. It's better to fly together than to fly alone." And in those simple words was contained all the wisdom that a special girl had used to transform not only her own life, but the lives of all those who had been fortunate enough to cross her path.